In the vast hush of interstellar drift, a silver-skinned ark glided beyond the fringe of known space, its wings glowing faintly as it rode gravity's gentle ripples. Inside the observation chamber of the elarin vessel Luminary Ascent Archivist, Virel stood in silent awe before the central projection, an ocean of stars woven into a living map. But his gaze was fixed not on any ancient system or familiar trade route. It hovered on a single trembling pulse, radiating from the edge of a yellow star's influence. The signal had arrived weeks ago, faint but structured, embedded with harmonics no natural source could produce. Virel had reviewed it endlessly, mathematical repetitions, tonal loops, crude linguistic markers, evidence not just of life, but cognition, civilization. It was everything he had devoted his centuries-long career to finding. Earth. Third planet, he murmured aloud, touching the hovering display with delicate fingers. Liquid water, oxygen atmosphere, nitrogen base, and now communication. His voice was serene, filled with wonder. The chamber shimmered as his senior aides entered Envoy Irisa, tall and fluid in motion, followed by a cluster of young navigators and xenocultural interpreters. They bowed respectfully, but their expressions held something beyond reverence. "Caution, Archivist," Irisa said gently. "There are anomalies in the human signal stream." Virel turned to her, head tilted in polite inquiry. "Much of it is disorder. They transmit in bursts. Some contain structured greetings, but others aggression, violence. They broadcast images of war, suffering, conquest. One stream shows combustion weapons detonating over populated cities. Another depicts territorial maps shifting violently across cycles." There was a pause as Irisa activated a sample. A grainy video played, dark smoke curling into the sky, people fleeing, a guttural language shouting from static-filled speakers. Virel watched, but his expression remained neutral. Infant species often shed such behaviors as they mature. He said calmly, "You forget, Irisa, we were not born enlightened. Our own archives speak of firestorms and blood before the consensus. What matters is not where they begin, but how they choose to evolve." Irisa hesitated, then inclined her head. "As you say, Archivist," Virel gestured toward the signal again. "Prepare the envoy. Send probe 319 into orbital. Survey. Establish atmospheric data, linguistic structure, and gravitational tides. Remain in observation only. No interaction. Let them feel watched, not touched." Within the hour, the probe launched an elegant construct of glimmering alloys and soft graviton wakes built for stealth and data gathering. It crept into Saul's embrace with the caution of a scholar tiptoeing through an untouched library. As the probe approached the blue world, Earth's beauty unfolded like a forgotten painting, cloud swirling like brushstrokes, continents bathed in golden sun, oceans trembling under starlight. The probe slipped into high orbit, sensors unfurling like petals. It began its work cataloging languages, power grids, signal traffic. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. A new signal, sharp, narrow, and pointed, stabbed back through the void with unsettling precision. "Unregistered object. This is orbital. Command Alpha 7. You are being tracked. Identify yourself immediately." Inside the Luminary Ascent, Virel froze. The probe's feed distorted. Not random interference, targeted lock on. And just like that, the vast silence of wonder gave way to the first whisper of fear. The stars above Earth shimmered with quiet indifference as the three elarin vessels emerged from the shadow of the moon. Their forms were fluid organic curves of silver-blue metal that shifted with purpose, whispering across low orbit like celestial dancers. Their arrival was silent, Their intent was peaceful. Their mistake was assuming they were the most advanced minds in the room. Commander Irisa stood tall on the command deck of the lead ship, Horizon's Grace, her posture the embodiment of the elarin ideal, calm, elegant, superior. Around her, the crew moved with well-practiced efficiency. To them, this was a routine diplomatic prelude, another step in their long mission to archive and elevate lesser civilizations. But under Irisa's skin, something crawled in unease she couldn't name. Earth signal stream re-established, announced Navigator Sella. They've switched to encrypted code. Pattern suggests high-level military protocol. Irisa frowned. Encrypted? Why? We broadcasted full peaceful protocol. We declared non-aggression in over 600 symbolic languages. Sella hesitated. Archivist Virel's directive was to approach with openness, but their signals, they've changed. Now they're sharp, measured, like teeth behind a smile. Before Irisa could respond, the ship's warning systems pulsed softly, then louder. A new pattern unfolded on the projection wall, a web of targeting locks, dozens, hundreds, all focused on the horizons, Grace and her two companion vessels. What is this? Irisa whispered. They see us ... as threats. Or prey, murmured tactical observer Kelrin. They're watching us through military eyes. A voice cut through the comms, deep and unwavering. Unidentified orbital presence. You have entered sovereign Earth space. Identify your origin and intent. Failure to comply will be treated as an act of aggression. It was not a request. It was a command. Irisa opened a broad-spectrum response channel. Her voice, when it emerged, was composed and resonant. This is Commander Irisa of the Elarin, Ascendancy Peace Envoy. We come with open hands and no weapons drawn. We offer knowledge, not harm. The channel closed. Silence. For 47 seconds. The only sound on the bridge was the soft hum of the life support systems. Then the stars bent. Space near Earth's orbit warped, pinched and split as a shadow bled through. It came without warning, without fold signature, without heat bloom. The human warship arrived. The UE's Valiant emerged like a memory sharpened into metal. No glowing core, no elegant symmetry. It was a blade blunt, dark, and built for war. It bore no windows, no exposed reactors, only seamless black armor that devoured light. It hung in orbit like a sentence waiting to be spoken. Irisa's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't a vessel built for diplomacy. This was a fortress. No an executioner. How did they bring that here without fold signatures? Kelrin whispered. No one answered. The Valiant turned slow, deliberate. Its angular hull realigned like shifting tectonic plates. The Elarin ships braced, passive systems shifting to reinforce shielding. Not to resist, but to survive. Then came the second message. You have 30 seconds to power down all active scans and propulsion systems. The countdown began. 20-9. Irisa moved instinctively. Power down our emitters. Cease all scans. Retreat to observation posture. 22. Should we activate phase shielding? Sella asked. No, Irisa said quickly. They may interpret it as a threat. 15. The Valiant remained still. No weapons emerged. No visual aggression. And yet it radiated pressure, as if the stars themselves bowed in its presence. 10. Irisa activated the diplomatic override. To the vessel identifying as Valiant, we repeat, this is a peaceful mission. Our ships are unarmed. We offer cultural exchange, not confrontation. 5. The countdown stopped. No response. No attack. And then a burst of light arced from the Valiant. Not a weapon, not a beam. Something else. The Elarin scout frigate Whisper's Path, third in formation, shuddered violently. Its systems blinked and died. No explosion, no visible damage, just silence. Artificial gravity disengaged. Power cells drained. The ship went dark in an instant, as if it had been shut off from the laws of physics. They used a quantum spike, Kelleran whispered in horror. We theorized it. They built it. Irisa stood frozen, watching the crippled ship drift, powerless. They're not testing us. They're sending a message. On the Valiant's bridge, Commander Rowen Locke watched from the shadows, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Lieutenant Ava Rios monitored the results. What's their response? Locke asked, voice low. Passive systems restored, but they're retreating formation. No countermeasures. Locke nodded. Good. Let's see if the scholars know how to learn. He turned toward the central display, a live readout of Earth's orbit. Beside the Elarin envoy, dozens of human satellites shimmered like baited traps. Hidden defense clusters, kinetic kill platforms, and one line of text blinking red. Phase-locked weapon systems, armed. Locke didn't smile. He didn't have to dot in orbit. The Valiant loomed closer, no more than a whisper in the black dot aboard. The horizon's grace. Irisa stared at the screen and finally understood. First contact had already happened, and the humans were not reaching out. They were watching to see who would flinch first. Space above Earth held its breath. The three Elarin vessels hung motionless now, their gleaming hulls dimmed, lights pulsed low, like whales drifting through deep waters sensing the presence of a predator. All outward transmission had ceased. All scans halted. The crew aboard Horizon's Grace whispered less now, breath tight in their throats. They had come with open hands, and the humans had answered with silence, followed by precision, power, and the deliberate crippling of one. Of their ships, it was not war. Not yet, it was restraint. And that terrified them more. From the far edge of orbital shadow, the UES Valiant prowled into view again, no engines burning, no emissions detectable. Its movement was quiet, impossible, alien. Irisa had seen 1,000 species, studied the architecture of over 80 civilizations across 4 spiral arms, but nothing in her centuries of observation had prepared her for this kind of engineering. Not elegant, not beautiful, just ruthless. Deep within the Valiant, Commander Rowen Locke stood alone in the obsidian-lined observation gallery, flanked by flickering data streams and silent defense algorithms. He stared out at the foreign ships with the cold, trained gaze of someone who had spent his life watching for patterns others missed, because he had learned the hard way what happened when you didn't. Locke's fingers twitched slightly as he reached toward a holographic panel. Live feeds flared into view. Orbital scans of the Elarin hull structures, decoded broadcast samples from their diplomatic relay, even real-time footage from stealth drones cloaked near their engine cores. Everything was catalogued, dissected. There. Advanced, said Lieutenant Ava Rios from behind him, her voice tight, but not coordinated. No sign of reactive targeting systems. No adaptive threat matrices. It's like they're trying not to look dangerous. Locke didn't turn, because they thought they'd be the only adults in the room. Ava stepped forward. We've been watching them longer than they know, sir. Their deep probes reached Neptune 7. Years ago. Command fed them false gravity readings, fake heat signatures, baited comms. Let them think we were still scrambling with ion drives and atmospheric boosters. Locke finally turned. His expression was unreadable. We showed them enough to make them curious, he said. And now they're here. They brought scholars to a chessboard they didn't know was already in checkmate. Ava nodded slowly. The question is, do we scare them just enough to leave? Or let them see the real pieces on the board? Locke gave no answer. Across space. Inside the command deck of the Horizon's Grace, Irisa convened her senior officers and whispered crisis. She had never felt like this before, small, outplayed, cornered. And still, she didn't believe the humans wanted war. Not yet. Their commander hasn't spoken, she said softly. Not once. Not a single voice from that ship. Intimidation. Tactic, Kelleran said. Pure psychological warfare. They don't need to speak when their silence says everything. Arisa shook her head. No. This isn't just threat display. It's calculation. We triggered something we don't understand. And I want to know what. She reached toward the central interface. Open a focus beam, tight band, low frequency, encrypted. You're reaching out? Sella asked, eyes wide. After what they did to Whisper's path, yes, Arisa replied. I want to know who commands that ghost. The beam lanced. Across space, just a whisper, a digital side toward the Valiant. For 16 minutes, there was nothing. Then her console flickered. The response came not in words, but in visual compression data, an old technique, thousands of years outdated, used to obscure high-level encryption signatures. The humans had masked their reply beneath a shell of junk code. Iris decrypted it in real time. Her hands trembled. The message was less than a sentence. You knew we were watching. And still, you came. Irisa stared at the text. There was no origin code, no signature. But the message was clear. The humans had known. They had monitored elarin transmissions for years, watched their deep scans, fed them false information, fed them Earth as a narrative. The humans had let them walk into a test. And now they were studying the result. They baited us, Kelleran said in disbelief. The entire system was a trap. No, Irisa whispered. It was a mirror. Commander Locke watched as the elarin comms darkened again. This time, he didn't order further action. He didn't need to. Phase-lock weapons stayed warm. Their own stealth cruisers, hidden across orbit, continued relaying real-time feeds of every fluctuation in elarin shielding. Do you think they understand yet? Ava asked. Locke's single quotes S-gaze didn't move. They will. We let them see what we wanted. Now we wait for the real reveal. And if they try to leave? Locke exhaled slowly. We let them and follow. They'll carry a warning to whatever empire they came from. That this little blue world is not to be touched. Not yet. On the horizons, Grace, Irisa stood still in the center of her command. Deck, heart racing. The message repeated on her screen. Each time, it felt heavier. You knew we were watching. And still, you came. It was not a declaration. It was a challenge. And somewhere behind that warship's cold hull, the humans were waiting, silent, watchful, ready to unleash what came next if provoked. Irisa finally spoke. We retreat. Now, full recall. Silent formation. Let's not wake the rest of their fleet. They only sent one ship, Kelleran said. Shaken. Irisa nodded once. Yes, and they called it the Valiant. No one dared ask what the others might be called. Far beyond the edge of Earth's gravity well, past the veil of lunar shadow and the glittering bones of old satellites, the elarin fleet drifted in silent retreat. But silence could not hold back the questions nor the shame. On board the Horizons, Grace, Commander Irisa sat alone in the private observation sphere, its transparent walls curving around her like a cradle of starlight. She watched Earth recede into the black, watched the Valiant remain unmoving, unreadable, a monolith of will. It had not followed. It had not spoken again. It did not need to. The damage had been done. A knock echoed behind her. Soft, respectful. It was Thalek, the fleet's senior analyst, not a soldier. Not a diplomat. A scientist. One of the few minds in the elarin ascendancy who understood what they had truly seen. You should see this, he said. Voice low. Irisa followed him into the deep intelligence core. where flickering data streams lit the chamber with pale blue light. Phallic gestured to the primary display. A series of waveforms played side-by-side communication bands, shield harmonics, magnetic field distortions. But the anomaly pulsed in the center, a sequence of irregular, non-random quantum spikes recorded from the Valiant just before the Elarin ship Whisper's path was disabled. "This is what they hit us with," Phallic said. "I've run simulations. They didn't damage us directly. They collapsed the probability field around our systems. They forced our reactor into shutdown by raising the likelihood of failure to 100%. Irisa frowned. "You mean they didn't fire a weapon in the traditional sense? They weaponized chance itself." He moved to the next display. "And that's not the worst of it." A new sequence appeared, something recorded before the Valiant had even arrived. Ancient background radiation, long dismissed as meaningless noise. But Phallic had amplified and decrypted it, revealing traces of encoded monitoring signals embedded in the cosmic background hum. Elarin communications, language, ship design schematics. They had been watched for over 30 years. They knew. He whispered. They were listening to our broadcasts, tracking our exploratory probes. They masked their advancements, fed us false data through the outer system. We saw what they wanted us to see. Irisa stared in disbelief. We didn't. Just walk into a trap. We walked into their classroom. And we were the lesson. In the center of the room, a hologram bloomed into view, the schematics of the Valiant, or rather, what little their scans had retrieved before being overridden. The ship's internal design was unreadable. The exterior armor refracted sensor. Waves. The engines gave off no known radiation. It was invisible by design. What kind of species builds a warship that doesn't want to be seen? Irisa asked. Thal single quotes Ek hesitated. A species that believes war should be won before it begins. Irisa's voice dropped. Or one that's hiding something far worse. The room fell into silence again, back on Earth, deep beneath the Pacific. In an unmarked facility carved into the bedrock, Commander Rowen Locke stood before the High Council of United Earth Defense Command. Above them, on the hollow platform, a frozen image of the Elarin flagship rotated slowly. Beside it, tactical overlays detailed energy emissions, vessel responses, quantum adaptation scores. The room was quiet, reverent. They retreated. General. Reyes said, Good, muttered Director Mason, folding his arms. Let them go home afraid. Locke didn't move. They're not afraid yet. They're curious. And that's a problem? Asked Reyes. Locke nodded. Curiosity is always the first stage. That's how our ancestors explored. It's also how they conquered. A pause. We gave them a glimpse, Locke continued. We let them see the Valiant. Let them think it was our best. But if they come back, and they will, they'll come with more than scholars. Mason leaned forward. And if they do? Locke's jaw tightened. Then we show them what we really built. Far below the facility, behind layers of titanium, shielding and quantum seal, a second warship slept. Unnamed, unseen. It did not orbit Earth. It did not emit signals. It was not in any registry, because it was not meant to be known, only awakened. Meanwhile, aboard the Horizon's Grace, Irisa convened a private council with Archivist Virel, now pale and silent, shaken by his miscalculation. His hands trembled as he examined the data Phallic had provided. I believe they would be naive, he said softly. Still young, still raw, but they have teeth, Irisa, sharp ones, hidden behind smiles and silence. Irisa stared at the rotating projection of the Valiant, then reached forward, freezing the image on a single section of the hull barely visible, almost an etching. But unmistakable. A name, In human script.u.e.'s valiant, they wanted us to read it, she murmured. They wanted us to know it. A warning? Varel asked. No, Irisa said. A signature. Outside the ship, stars turned slowly. The dark side of Earth gleamed with artificial light and invisible weapons. Elarin had come expecting to uplift a primitive world. Instead, they had awakened a species that had evolved not through benevolence or consensus, but through survival. And survival bred monsters in the dark. In the frozen dark of the Kuiper Belt, where sunlight fades to a pale whisper and the silence feels ancient, a listening post blinked once, then went dark. It was not an explosion. Not a breach. It simply ceased. One moment, it hummed with coded relays and deep sky surveillance. The next, its systems registered a quantum surge, a frequency spike measured only once before, during the Valiant's demonstration over Earth. But this was stronger, refined. It pulsed once through the post-sensor arrays, collapsed their probability matrices, and folded their data streams into static. Then, nothing. In the heart of the United Earth Defense Command's deep core operations center, alarms blared silently, no sound, only red pulses in the walls. Commander Rowen Locke entered without a word. The room froze. Station Nova 2 is offline, reported Lieutenant Sharma. No debris, no atmospheric rupture. All system. Clocks stopped simultaneously. Same temporal fracture pattern we recorded on the Elarin Scout. Locke's eyes narrowed. Origin? Unknown. No propulsion wake. No mass signature. Whatever hit them came from outside our dimensional vector. There was a silence colder than space. Locke turned slowly. Wake it up. His words hung in the air like a blade. Below them, thousands of meters beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, a pulse ignited, soft, pulsing, ominous. Containment vaults split open as the power core of Project Nightglass began to breathe. Back on the horizon's grace. Deep in Elarin-controlled space, Irisa stood before a holographic star map. She had not slept in 47 rotations. Not since she'd traced the full trajectory of Earth's development and found the lie. Humanity had not stumbled into space. They had clawed their way into the stars through warfare, extinction, trial by fire. Their earliest radio broadcasts had been nothing but static, then conflict, then structure, then silence. A silence too clean. They shut it off, Phalek said quietly behind her. On purpose, a century ago. Just ... turn the volume down. So we'd come closer, so we'd think they were behind. Irisa nodded once. They manufactured weakness to provoke us, to prepare us. The council had met twice already. Archivist Virel had collapsed under the weight of his failure and been placed in stasis. The ascendancy wanted to withdraw all envoys from human-perceived territory. But Irisa had not obeyed. She'd stayed, circling the outer systems, listening. And now, she heard something. It came from just outside Neptune's shadow, a flicker on the fringe of comprehension. A burst of compressed data, raw, mathematical, ancient. It wasn't human. And it wasn't Elarin. It was older. Irisa called Phalek. Decode this. As they worked, something formed in the signal. Not words, but a warning. Not from humans about humans. They had not only been watched by the elarin. Others had seen them too. Others who had once tried to consume them and failed. The signal was fragmented, but one part was unmistakable. If you are receiving this, do not engage. The apex world is no longer dormant. They have inherited the engine. Phalek stepped back, visibly shaken. They weren't just hiding technology. They've accessed something. Ancient. Irisa turned slowly. Something buried? He nodded. Something buried on their world, maybe in their species. That phrase, the engine, it matches reports from dead civilizations. Fragments from the Monari collapse, the Kelf cycle implosion. Worlds that didn't fall to war. They fell to corruption by interface. What kind of interface? Biosynthetic, adaptive, conscious, Irisa whispered. A sentient weapon? Thalek didn't answer, but far across the system, inside a containment vault now pulsing with life, Project Nightglass activated its primary consciousness node. It did not speak. It did not awaken with sound. It dreamed, and in its dream, it remembered being hunted. It remembered surviving. Commander. Locke stood before the viewing chamber as the project's central core formed a solid-shaped black glass around a pulsing sphere of light. Status? He asked. Ava Reyes answered without looking up. Stabilized. Awake. Hungry. Does it remember the elarin? It remembers everything, Locke nodded. Deploy it. Where? Don't send it to them, Locke said. Send it past them. Let them see it move. Let them know we chose not to use it against them. Reyes hesitated. That could be seen as escalation. Locke's voice dropped. No, that's mercy. Within hours, a shimmering distortion curved space near the edge of elarin territory. Sensors screamed. Dimensional fields fractured. But there was no attack. Just the passage of something massive and alive. It never broadcasted. It never turned. The elarin picked up one signature, a low hum, encoded with primitive Earth languages. Akia. Single line old from a long-dead broadcast frequency. In war, we learn to survive. In peace, we learn to hide. Now we remember. Back on the horizon's grace, Irisa stood watching the recording on loop. Not one shot fired. No hostility shown. But it was a message. Earth did not need diplomacy to make itself understood. It had evolved something stronger than war. The restraint of the apex. The stars had begun to whisper. Not in words, not in sound, but in fractures, glitches of gravity, unexplainable distortions rippling across multiple sectors near Sol. Civilizations on the galactic fringe began to notice. Distant outposts registered. Sensor echoes, something vast moving through subspace like a storm with no center. And every time the anomalies passed, systems dimmed. Probability fields collapsed. Translation cores failed. Old satellites desensed from reality and never reconnected. The signals were faint, but the warning was clear. The apex species had awakened. Aboard the elarin vessel Horizon's Grace. Irisa stood at the center of a quiet war. She had not returned. To the core, she had not submitted her report. Instead, she had broken protocol, rerouted her course, and followed the faint echo of what had passed near their borders. The thing the humans had not fired, not spoken, just shown. Like a beast marking its territory with silence and pressure. They called it Project Nightglass. They didn't announce it. They unleashed it. And now, Irisa watched the playback again. Sensor recordings, time-stamped waveforms, gravitational distortions. But it wasn't the data that chilled her. It was what wasn't there. No heat signature, no propulsion trail, no communication. The thing had slid between reality and void like it owned both. It wasn't a weapon. It was a herald. We've reanalyzed its wake, Thalek said beside her, voice low. The dimensional shift wasn't just spatial. It was temporal. The regions it passed through now exhibit chronal anomalies, localized time dilation, pockets where causality failed to align. Irisa said nothing. She was watching something else now. Something hidden in the signal they'd received earlier, the one that warned them not to engage the humans. She had fed it through every ancient cipher, dissected every curve. And there, beneath the noise, she had found it. An origin signature. Not from Earth. Not human. Kel thin design. The Kelf Empire had vanished 6,000 years ago. Not defeated. Not collapse. Erase. And now Irisa knew why. They didn't just survive the Kelth, she whispered. They consumed them. Phallic. Face turned pale. It wasn't human ingenuity alone, she continued. They inherited something, or it inherited them. They bonded with a quantum construct, something capable of rewriting the fabric of cause and effect, something the Kelth couldn't control. And the humans didn't destroy it, they tamed it. How? Phallic asked. Irisa shook her head. No idea, but that warship, the Valiant, wasn't the threat. It was the threshold. Suddenly, a proximity alarm screamed through the ship. Lights dimmed. All screens blinked red. Dimensional field distortion. Local space compressing. Something was arriving. Not a weapon. Not a ship. A message. It didn't come on radio waves or light. Pulses. It came as a thought, invasive, calm, perfectly translated into elarin syntax, but carrying no identifiable source. Irisa stiffened. The message unfurled across every screen on board. We saw your curiosity. We respected your restraint. Now we offer one truth. Do not follow us. Do not emulate us. What you admire is not victory. It is consequence. And then, beneath that, we have already mourned what we became to survive. Phallic fell silent. His voice caught in his throat. Outside the ship, stars twisted once. Space buckled. A ripple passed across the hull, but it wasn't pressure. It was memory, shared, ancient. An image burned into the minds of every crew member aboard Horizon's Grace. A world. Burning, not Earth. Something older. Perhaps the Kelth homeworld. Torn apart not by weapons, but by probability collapse. Entire cities erased from time mid-sentence, and at the center of that firestorm a single human figure, silhouetted, reaching toward the sky, eyes full of grief. Then, nothing. The vision ended. The silence returned. No trace of what had caused it. Irisa staggered back, trembling. They showed us. Their shame. Phallic knelt, breathing unevenly. What kind of species chooses to remember that and keeps it alive? The kind that wants no one to become like them, Irisa said, barely able to speak. Deep within the United Earth facility beneath Antarctica, Commander Rowen Locke watched the pulse data fade from the interface. The experiment had worked. They had delivered the message directly into the minds of their former observers. No war, no invasion, no demands. Just truth. Reaction? General Reyes asked. They won't follow, Locke said. They know now. Ava Reyes, standing nearby, didn't speak. She stared at the memory playback in silence. She had seen the same thing, Project Nightglass's memories encoded in light and thought. Not as propaganda. As warning, because the humans hadn't built the engine to conquer. They had built it to stop something worse. And to do that, they had become what they feared. Locke's voice was quiet as he turned from the display. We survived the dark, he said, but not without scars. And now, across the galaxy, others were beginning to see them too. The galaxy did not scream when the message spread. It did not cry, did not echo in chaos. It only shuddered, subtly, like an old structure remembering the first crack in its foundation. From the edge of the Nikar, fringed to the towering citadels of the Verakai lattice. From the drifting archives of the Talari enclaves to the collapsed empire shells left behind by the Kelth, every species with eyes to see and ears to decode received it not through standard comms, but through something deeper, more ancient. A pulse, a memory. An imprint burned directly into the neural substrate of consciousness itself. Some dismissed it as an elaborate hoax. Others believed it was a veiled threat from an emerging empire. But those who had lived long enough to remember the disappearance of the Kelth, they knew better. They recognized the pattern. the scent of something unnatural that had walked through history not to conquer, but to bury the past beneath its feet. And at the center of that spreading storm, Earth stood still, quiet, resolute. Unshaken. Commander Rowen Locke moved through the corridors of the UES Valiant, now docked in high lunar orbit. The ship groaned as its systems powered down for the first time in 9 months. It had done what it was built for, not to fight, but to warn. Inside the secure debriefing chamber, he stood before a panel of officials from the United Earth Defense Command, the Scientific Council, and 2 newly arrived observers from the Martian Coalition and Europa Alliance. A map hovered between them, marked by a dozen new dimensional fractures spreading like veins from the system's near soul. The engines. Projection worked, Locke said flatly. We've confirmed cognitive receipt from at least 11 civilizations. 3 attempted immediate withdrawal from the sector. 2 have gone completely dark. And the elarin? Asked General Reyes. Locke looked her in the eye. They sent a final message. He activated the recording. A single quote's voice came through, steady, respectful, but now laced with a reverence that hadn't existed before. To those who hold the memory of fire inside their bones, we have heard your silence. We saw the shape of your restraint. We do not claim to understand what you've done, but we understand why you did it. We will not follow. Not because we fear your weapons, but because we've seen the price of your survival. Locke shut it off. No one in the room spoke for a long time. Then Dr. Zhao from the Martian Bioethics Committee finally asked, was it necessary to show them that memory? To open the engine's vaults? To share the ... Grief? Locke's reply was simple, yes. He turned toward the darkened screen where Project Nightglass rested now in cryonic dormancy. They needed to see the price. Not the weapon, not the threat, the weight. Ava Reyes stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes hollow. They thought. We were children. We showed them the monster we had to become to survive a war no one else remembers. And we begged them not to awaken their own. Across the stars, the elarin returned to their core worlds. Irisa stood before the high ascendancy, and for the first time in 8,000 years of uninterrupted diplomatic tradition, she said nothing. In her report for the first 10 minutes, not a word, because words could not carry what she had seen. The weight of consequence, the echo of extinction. The will to remain when all else had fallen. She finally concluded with one line. Earth is not to be studied. It is not to be tested. It is not to be invited. It is to be remembered. The ascendancy fell silent. Across other star nations, similar messages began to circulate, encoded warnings, scattered signals, psychological reports dissecting the human experience not as a species, but as a phenomenon, one born in violence, shaped by loss, and preserved by the invention of something that defied natural law. What had been built was not just a superweapon. It was a grief machine. A sentient interface made to remember a genocide so that it could prevent another. Humans didn't want to conquer. They wanted no one to ever be forced to become them. 6 months later, far from the attention of councils and defense networks, Commander Locke sat alone in a small garden just outside Oslo. Beneath the artificial starlight canopy that had replaced the polluted sky, a young girl ran through the grass ahead of him, her laughter soft and alive. Not a dream, not a vision. His daughter, alive, restored through encoded quantum fragments. One of the first resurrection trials allowed under the engine's influence. A gift he hadn't expected to survive the war. He closed his eyes. This was what they fought for. Not the power, not the fear, but the possibility. A seat at peace, a life rebuilt. A silence earned through restraint. Ava joined him with 2 cups of tea. She handed him one, sat in the grass beside him, and said nothing. They didn't have to speak. They had already said what needed to be said across space, across time, into the bones of civilizations who thought they were first to ascend. Weren't. And now they knew why the humans had kept to themselves for so long, not because they were afraid, but because they remembered what came before, and they refused to become it again. Beneath the quiet stars, as the galaxy turned slowly toward a future shaped by that memory, the sleeping engine beneath Antarctica pulsed once like a heartbeat, like a promise. We endured. Now we guard.